Somewhere in South Korea's North Jeolla province, there is a village where the youngest permanent resident is 63 years old. According to Statistics Korea, more than 1,800 villages across the country now have no residents under the age of 65. That is not a projection, it is the current reality. So the question worth asking is this: what does a country look like when entire communities simply age out of existence? And what happens to the people still living inside them? The scale of this shift is difficult to absorb. Statistics Korea reports that, as of the most recent census, the population of Korea's rural gun counties, that is, counties outside cities and large towns, has fallen to under 9 million people, from roughly 18 million in 1980. The proportion of rural residents aged 65 and over now exceeds 36%, compared to a national average of around 18%, according to the same agency. The Korea Rural Community Corporation has documented that the number of operational farms fell by nearly half between 2000 and 2020, and the Ministry of Education reports that more than 3,800 primary schools have been closed or merged across the country since 1980, the vast majority of them in rural areas. When a school closes, demographers say it is rarely a symptom. It is a signal that the community has already passed a point of no return. This did not happen by accident. Korea's industrialization strategy, beginning in the 1960s under government direction, was deliberately concentrated in cities. First Seoul, then Busan, then a ring of export-oriented industrial centers. Young people followed the jobs and the universities. The OECD has noted that Korea's urbanization rate rose from roughly 28% in 1960 to over 91% today, one of the steepest climbs ever recorded. Rural areas were not neglected so much as left behind by design. Agricultural incomes simply could not compete with factory wages. Then a second wave hit. Korea's total fertility rate, already the lowest in the OECD at 0.72 as of the most recent Bank of Korea report, meant there were fewer young people everywhere. In rural areas where young people had already been leaving for 2 generations, the combined effect was devastating. Small villages entered a self-reinforcing spiral. Fewer young residents meant fewer services, which pushed out the few who remained. The costs are both visible and invisible. Visibly, Korea's Ministry of the Interior and Safety has identified over 65,000 vacant or abandoned homes in rural areas, a figure that has roughly doubled in a decade. Local governments in counties like Ucheong in North Gyeongsang Province have seen their tax base shrink so severely that basic road maintenance and elderly care services are now partially funded by transfers from the central government. Less visibly, the human cost is profound. A Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs survey found that over 40% of elderly people living alone in rural areas reported not having a single substantive conversation with another person for more than a week at a time. Agricultural knowledge, how to manage specific hillside terraces, which seed varieties suit a particular microclimate, is disappearing with the people who hold it. Some of it cannot be written down. When the last farmer who knows it dies, it is simply gone. Korea is not alone in this. Japan's Ministry of Internal Affairs has identified nearly 900 officially designated marginal villages, known as genkai shuraku, at risk of extinction. Rural depopulation is accelerating in southern Italy, eastern Germany, and across interior China. What Korea's case reveals is how quickly the process becomes irreversible once a community falls below a certain threshold of young residents. Economists call this a demographic lock-in. Once schools close, young families will not move there. And without young families, schools will never reopen. The Korean government has tried incentive programs to attract urban residents back to the countryside, with limited and uneven results. The deeper lesson may be this: economic development is not automatically shared development. A country can become extraordinarily wealthy and still leave entire communities to quietly disappear. That is not a Korean story, it is a universal one,